Hey guys, tonight we slip into something terribly uncomfortable. A thick, itchy, absolutely boiling hot Roman toga. You're not ready for this. And honestly, neither were they. It's the middle of summer in ancient Rome, the kind where the air tastes like baked dust, your sandals stick to sun-softened cobbles, and you start to question all of your life choices.
You're standing outside the Curia Julia, the Senate house, sweating through your linen underlayers and draped over that, because law, and de-honor demand it, is several yards of heavy wool. Congratulations, you're a Roman senator. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop a comment with your location and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun sets reluctantly over the Seven Hills, its last golden streaks lighting up rows of columned facades. You're walking slowly, not for drama, but because togas don't exactly allow speed. They're a clumsy mess of wool, carefully wrapped, pinned, and adjusted so you look respectable, or at least not like a wool burrito with sandals. The fabric weighs on your shoulder like a lazy dog. There's a persistent itch where the seam digs into your collarbone and a mosquito hovers near your ear.
You swat and almost trip on your hem. Classic toga problems, and yet everyone sees you, every slave, merchant, soldier, and gossiping matron, and they know immediately this man matters, even if he's melting like wax under his robes. Here's the ridiculous truth. The toga wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed to make a statement. A sweaty, dramatic, look at me, I'm a living symbol of Roman virtue kind of statement. Senators were walking billboards for the Republic's values, dignity, gravity, tradition, and apparently heat stroke. What you're wearing is a toga pura, the classic white version, reserved for Roman citizens in public life. But yours has a little something extra, a broad purple stripe, the latus clavus, running down the front like a royal racing stripe. That's how they know you're a senator and not, say, a guy trying to return fish sauce at the market. Now it's late July. Cicadas are screaming from every olive tree. The Tiber smells like old soup. And inside the Senate House, the air is thick with tension, ambition, and the collective body odor of 300 men wrapped in wool. Not exactly air-conditioned diplomacy. You shift your weight. A trickle of sweat runs down your back. Maybe you regret that second helping of honeyed dormouse earlier. It's hard to say what's worse, the heat from outside or the heat rising from inside your own robes. But still you stand proud. Why? Because to be a senator in Rome is to suffer with elegance. It's to represent centuries of ritual, law, and civic virtue. You didn't get here by lounging in silk tunics. You got here because you believed in Rome, and you were willing to roast slowly to prove it. Now picture this. Earlier today, a younger senator dared to arrive in a simplified garment, shorter, breezier, less toga-y. The scandal! You'd think he'd punched Jupiter in the face. Murmurs broke out before he even sat down. A veteran senator clutched his pearls, his ivory seal ring, and declared civilization was crumbling. That's how important the toga was. It wasn't just fabric. It was the sacred armor of the Republic, wool be damned. And yet even now, some historians argue whether these senators wore their togas all day or just for formal appearances. Did they secretly change into tunics when no one was watching? Did they cut corners with thinner wool or illegal linen blends? The records don't say. But judging from all the statues, paintings, and angry moralizing speeches from old senators yelling at clouds, it's safe to say, yes, they really wore them, even when it made no sense. Even in summer, there's something wonderfully absurd about it, isn't there? A civilization that engineered aqueducts and concrete still forced its leaders to parade around in a prehistoric blanket. Practicality bowed before symbolism. Rome was many things, but ergonomic wasn't one of them. You find your seat on a stone bench inside the Curia, marble beneath you, more marble behind you. Echoes carry across the chamber as sandals slap the floor
and senators clear their throats. Someone coughs, someone else fans himself with a scroll. The presiding consul raises a hand and the room quiets. Debate begins. Topics include grain prices, provincial rebellions, and whether to build another bath complex near the Esquilin. But honestly, you're not paying full attention. You're too busy trying not to pass out from the heat. One guy actually dozes off against a column, his toga elegantly draped, of course. And you wonder, not for the first time, who decided wool was the best material for Mediterranean summers? Did they just have a surplus of sheep? Was it an elaborate prank? Or did it just look that good on marble statues? As night creeps on, oil lamps flicker in their sconces, shadows stretch long. You stand to vote, adjust your toga yet again, and dream of cool baths and thinner fabrics. Outside, the moon rises over the forum, silvering the rooftops and statues. You step out into the breeze, which feels like a kiss from the gods. You made it through another day as a senator, and tomorrow you'll wrap yourself in wool all over again. You wake up before the sun, not because you're disciplined, but because it's too hot to sleep past dawn. Your bed's straw mattress has left a mosaic of scratches across your back, and your tunic clings like wet parchment. But duty calls, and so does tradition. You stretch, yawn, and eye the toga folded neatly by your slave the night before. It's early, but already the day is promising to be a scorcher. The kind where even the marble floors can't stay cool, and the air gets that weird metallic shimmer that makes the city look like it's melting. You splash water on your face, not that it helps much, and brace yourself for the daily ritual, draping the toga. If there's anything that requires both grace and emotional fortitude before breakfast, it's this. You've got roughly 18 feet of wool, give or take, to wrap just right. One fold must sweep over the left shoulder, one under the right arm, then looped across the chest like a sash of virtue. And don't forget the sinus, that handy toga pouch where you keep important things like wax tablets, snacks, or possibly emergency olives. Even with assistance, it takes a solid 10 minutes to get it to look halfway decent. And there's no belt. Nope, it just kind of clings there. You lean slightly so it doesn't slide off entirely. If you're lucky, gravity is on your side today, and you think, who invented this thing? Historians trace the toga back to the early days of Rome, when Etruscans wore it as a standard garment. Back then, it was simpler, more cloak-like. As Rome grew into a republic, then an empire, the toga evolved from a humble wrap to a symbol of absolute citizenship and masculinity. No foreigners, women, or slaves allowed to wear it. It became a textile badge of honor, woven with expectations. But that honor came at a price. The toga was famously hot, heavy, and awkward, especially in summer. Yet Roman elites clung to it like it was stitched from Jupiter's beard hairs, because wearing the toga wasn't about comfort, it was about declaring to the world, I am Roman, I am virtuous, and I am incredibly sweaty for the sake of public service. By now, the streets are alive with the thump of sandals, the cry of vendors, and the low grumble of carts hauling amphorae and fish. You step out into this orchestra of commerce, careful not to trip on your hem. The toga's dragging slightly, it always does, but you lift your chin like the citizen you are. A gust of warm wind kicks up dust and something that smells faintly like goat. You pass other men in togas, some neat, some half falling apart. There's the old ex-magistrate with the mustard stain from yesterday, and a smug new quaestor looking like he ironed his with the god's own lightning bolt. But you notice something curious. None of them are fanning themselves, not even a finger raised to wipe away sweat. That's because showing discomfort was frowned upon. Romans prized stoicism, the stiff upper lip, before the stiff upper lip existed. To fidget, complain, or look uncomposed was to signal weakness, which could ruin a political career faster than a bad omen from the augurs. So you suffer in silence, you let the sweat pool, the wool itch, and you hold your posture like your dignity depends on it. Of course, some did try shortcuts. Light-coloured togas to reflect heat, thinner weaves, maybe even a touch of linen blended in. But that was risky. Too light a fabric and people might question your manliness, or worse, your Romanness. And that was political suicide. One satirical poet joked that a senator's sweat smells like honor, probably while not wearing one himself, because make no mistake, these things were miserable. And if you're wondering, did Rome ever consider not wearing them? Did any senator stand up and say, "But hey guys, maybe there's a better way"? The answer is maybe. Historians still argue whether there were quiet movements of resistance, not protests in the forum, but subtle, whispered acts of defiance. Senators wearing modified versions behind closed doors, shorter folds, cooler materials when visiting provinces. There's evidence of some mid-level officials sneaking around in simpler tunics and only donning the toga for ceremonial appearances. But for most, the risk wasn't worth it. The Senate was an image machine, and that image came with wool. Lots of it. You pass through the forum, its grand temples casting long shadows as the sun climbs higher. Vendors hawk lemons, slaves carry buckets of water, and you spot a group of young men practicing their oratory, togas slipping off shoulders, voices cracking, ambitions swelling. You remember being one of them once, back when the toga was still exciting, a symbol of arrival. Now it's mostly just heavy. There's a moment of quiet as you stop at a shaded fountain. You lower yourself carefully onto the stone edge, mind the drape, and dip
your fingers into the water. Cool relief. It makes you sigh a little too audibly, and a passing senator raises an eyebrow. You give him a polite nod, not too casual, you're still in character. Behind you, a child tugs at her mother's sleeve and whispers, "Why's he dressed like that?" The mother answers softly, "Because he's important." You smile faintly, then rise, adjusting your toga once more. The day's just beginning, another debate, another round of ceremonial suffering, all in the name of Rome. And so you trudge onward, sun beating down, toga sticking, dignity intact, at least mostly. You're halfway up the Capitol Hill now, the toga pulling at your shoulder like a needy toddler. Every step is calculated, partly to avoid slipping, but mostly to keep the damn thing from unraveling. At least the breeze is trying its best, rustling the hem around your calves like a flirty ghost. But make no mistake, it's not refreshing.
It's just hot air moving faster. Ahead, the Temple of Jupiter looms, its white stone glowing under the already brutal sun. You pause, pretending to admire the architecture, but really, it's a tactical break. Sweat trickles down your back, pooling at the waist, where wool meets skin in a reluctant embrace. This, you remind yourself, is the price of prestige. Inside the Curia, the Senate is already stirring. You pass through the wide bronze doors and it hits you. The thick, stale air of hundreds of men sitting shoulder to shoulder in wool robes. It's like a toga sauna minus the eucalyptus. And yet no one flinches, no fanning, no fidgeting. The silence is reverent, save for the occasional rustle of parchment or the discreet squeak of leather sandals. You take your seat, stone bench, no cushion of course, and adjust your toga again, looping the sinus so it forms a casual little pouch in your lap. Might come in handy later. Maybe you'll smuggle in a fig. You look around and realize something. Every single man here is suffering. Some are better at hiding it, sure. There's the elder statesman with his famously iron posture, who probably sweats olive oil by now. And there's young Marcus, whose folds are too crisp, clearly dressed by his mother's slaves. You give a subtle tug to the fold near your neck. It's itchy, probably camel hair woven into the wool again. Some togas were woven finer, even imported. But the irony? The most luxurious ones were often heavier, more status, more suffering. Because in Rome, comfort was for cowards. And speaking of suffering for status, let's talk colour. You might assume the toga was always white, pure, austere, classic. That's the toga virilis, the standard adult male version. But there were others. If you were running for office, you wore the toga candida, a chalk-whitened monstrosity that glowed like a full moon and probably got dirty just by thinking about lunch. Hence, candidate. You were literally the guy in the bright white toga, desperate to be noticed. Then there was the toga praetexta, edged with a purple stripe, only for magistrates and upper-class boys. a way of saying, I'm powerful, or I will be, so don't jostle me in the crowd. And let's not forget the toga pulla, the black or dark toga of mourning, probably the only time anyone was glad to wear a different version because at least it wasn't blindingly white wool in July. As the session begins, an older senator stands to speak, his voice calm, rehearsed. You watch the slow sway of his folds as he gestures, every movement deliberate like a dance. You realize how practiced this all is, how these robes are as much about choreography as costume. Because the toga isn't just a garment, it's a performance, a moving billboard of citizenship. And if you draped it right, held your posture just so, and nailed the oratory, you could rise through the ranks faster than a freedman at a banquet. Still, the itch, always the itch. Now here's something most people forget. Under that stately wool, most senators wore nothing else. No undergarments, no linen tunics, just bare skin and the toga. It made the drape easier, supposedly. But let's be honest, it was probably just a recipe for thigh chafing and awkward breezes. Historians still argue whether this nudity was exaggerated or symbolic, but there's enough poetry and graffiti about toga flaps to raise eyebrows. And don't forget the weight. Depending on the quality, a full-length toga could weigh over 15 pounds. Imagine dragging around a small dog on your shoulders while making legal decisions. Senators must have had excellent core strength or permanent back problems. One senator near you adjusts subtly, and a small scroll drops from his sinus. You raise an eyebrow, but say nothing. That pouch was handy, yes, but it had a reputation. Some senators were caught sneaking notes, snacks, or worse, bribes. You pretend not to notice as he scoops it up. Politics, after all, is just toga deep. As the debate rolls on, grain imports, tax reforms, the usual, you start to zone out a little. Your mind wanders, like it does when you're sleep-deprived and overheated. You start imagining alternatives. What if senators wore tunics again? Or maybe a summer toga made of linen? Or, brace yourself, togas with pockets? But such dreams are dangerous. To tamper with the toga is to tamper with Rome itself. The garment was so closely tied to identity that even questioning it would get you labelled a radical. Or worse, a Greek sympathizer. And no one wants that. You snap back as someone calls your name. Time to vote. You stand, speak your mind in the practiced tone of a man used to being half listened to, and sit back down, adjusting your folds like a weary bird, fluffing its feathers. Eventually, the session ends. Senators begin to file out, most of them carefully keeping their expressions blank. No one wants to look too relieved. Outside, the sun has climbed even higher. It's nearly noon. And the toga? It's now officially unbearable. But your duties aren't over. You've got a client meeting to attend, followed by a quick sacrifice at the temple, and then maybe, just maybe, you'll get to collapse in your atrium with a chilled cup of watered wine. Still, as miserable as it is, part of you understands the ritual. The shared discomfort creates a bond, a reminder that being Roman isn't easy. It's itchy, it's hot, it's heavy, and somehow it works. You descend the Capitol slowly, steps heavy from heat and history. The toga clings like a needy ex, stubbornly gripping your hips and ankles with every awkward shuffle. Below, the forum churns like a cauldron, merchants shouting, slaves darting through crowds, the clatter of hooves echoing against marble columns. And you? You're sweating through 12 feet of wool, pretending it's normal. You make your way toward the Basilica Julia, a shadowy haven compared to the blaze outside. It's cooler here, barely, but your skin sighs with relief. A group of clients awaits, forming a tidy line like pigeons near a grain cart. These are your clients, men and families, who rely on your legal status, name, and yes, your fashion sense, to boost their own fortunes. It's patronage in action, and you're the walking billboard for Roman respectability. And the toga? It's part of the deal. Without it, they wouldn't trust you to pour wine, let alone defend their cases. As you greet them, offering the standard nods and empty flattery, one young man steps forward wearing something suspiciously manageable. His toga is shorter, lighter, possibly even cotton. You blink, bold, maybe too bold. The older clients are already side-eyeing him like he just insulted Jupiter's beard. Because here's the thing, not all togas were created equal. By the late Republic and into the Empire, the toga had become a minefield of unwritten rules. Too short, you're lazy; too white, you're trying too hard; too wrinkled, you've been drinking again; and if you showed up in a Greek-style hymation, may the gods have mercy on your soul. Historians still argue whether these fashion rules were formalized or just peer-policed, but the evidence leans toward a kind of collective judgment. One misstep and suddenly you're the punchline of a satire, or worse, a cautionary statue in someone's garden. As the crowd thins, you duck out and circle behind the basilica to catch a breeze. A few other senators are there, similarly wilting, similarly trying to hide it. One offers a weak chuckle. "You'd think the gods could have invented ventilation," he mutters, fanning himself with a scroll. Another adds, "or at least armholes." The group laughs, quietly, of course, but the sentiment lingers. The toga wasn't made for comfort, it was made for display. Think of it like a living resume visible from across a plaza. It said, "I am Roman, I am male, I belong." Even slaves and foreigners understood it, and many mimicked it when trying to climb the social ladder. But, oh, the irony, the more you wore it, the less you wanted to. You trudge away again, this time toward the Temple of Vesta. It's not your usual route, but you need the excuse to walk in shade, even if it adds 20 minutes to your schedule. As you move past statues and altars, you catch sight of one especially curious figure carved in marble. A senator, arms outstretched, folds perfectly arranged, a look of calm on his chiseled face. Of course, in real life, his toga would have fallen off 3 seconds into that pose. That's another fun truth. No one really knew how to wear it well. The toga was absurdly complicated to drape. No zippers, no buttons, no secret ties, just one big loop of cloth, folded and tucked and balanced like an origami project that hates you. Wealthier men had slaves trained specifically for the task. A vestiplicus, yes, that was an actual job title, whose sole purpose was to artfully fold your misery. One wrong move and the whole thing could collapse mid-speech, leaving you half-naked and entirely humiliated. And this wasn't just theoretical. There are poems, gossip fragments, and comedic plays all poking fun at toga mishaps. It's basically Rome's version of a wardrobe malfunction, except the whole city saw it, and someone probably wrote an epic about it. You pass a small group of schoolboys on the way. They're wearing their own little versions, togas praetexta with purple edging, marking them as sons of senators or magistrates. They look uncomfortable, itchy, and annoyed. One of them whispers, "Do we have to wear this when it's hot?" Another answers, "Yes. Father says it builds character." Poor kid, he's already halfway to becoming you. By the time you reach your domus, the sun is threatening to melt tile. The slave at the door offers you a basin of water to wash your face. The first splash is pure bliss. You peel the toga off like a molting snake, letting it fall in a damp, twisted pile on the floor. Your tunic, blessed linen, is damp underneath, but somehow still better than the outer shell. You collapse onto a couch, not dramatically, just with the slow surrender of someone who's lived through a woolen battlefield. Your wife peeks in. "Tough day?" she asks, already knowing. "Standard, 3 scrolls, 2 speeches, 1 toga crisis." She smiles. She's heard it before. You sip a cup of watered wine and let the room fade into twilight. Outside, Rome hums. Inside, for once, you are not wearing 12 feet of tradition. You are just a man. Quiet, cool, free. Well, until the next Senate session, anyway, because the toga waits, and you'll wear it again, not because you love it, but because you must. You wake before dawn, as always, because even the great Roman Empire can't function on oversleeping. The air is cooler now, but only slightly, and the stone floor beneath your feet makes you shiver. For a fleeting moment, you wonder what life would have been like as a farmer. Less prestige, yes, but also no togas. Then again, the countryside has its own curses. Ticks, thunder gods, goats that never listen. You stretch and reach for the folded beast waiting on a low bench, the toga. It stares at you, smug and unyielding, like a cat that knows you can't live without it. You sigh and call in your vestiblicus, your personal toga wrangler. He enters like a priest about to perform a sacred ritual, and honestly, that's not far off. He lifts the toga with both hands, unfurling its full width like a ceremonial flag. The wool billows out, impossibly wide. It's freshly brushed, lightly perfumed with crushed laurel leaves, and still bears the faint scent of yesterday's sweat. He begins to wrap. Over the left shoulder, under the right arm, twist, fold, drape. He tugs here, adjusts there. A final tuck over the arm to form the distinctive pouch that says, "I am respectable but also tragically warm." You don't move. Any sudden gesture could undo the entire effort. The process takes nearly 10 minutes. That's on a good day. On bad days, it's like trying to put a fitted sheet on a waterfall. And still this ridiculous garment persists. Why? Because it tells the world you are not a labourer. You don't sweat for coins, you speak for them. You advise generals, influence laws, whisper into emperors' ears. That toga, dumb, stuffy, drapey as it is, proves your status without saying a word. But here's the dirty secret of Roman fashion. Underneath the pomp, even the elite were constantly tweaking the rules. The toga, once a simple woolen wrap, evolved over time. What started as a practical cloak for chilly mornings transformed into a status monster with more variations than a modern sneaker line. There were the toga virilis for adult men, toga praetexta for officials and boys, toga pulla for mourning, and the blinding white toga candida for men running for office. Candida, as in dazzling white, achieved by chalk dusting it until it glowed like a heavenly napkin. Historians still argue whether these distinctions were consistently enforced or more like fashion guidelines, honoured by some, ignored by others. There's graffiti in Pompeii showing political candidates making promises, and sometimes the drawings have them in what looks like a too short or badly drawn toga. Satirical? Maybe. Or maybe even then people were sick of the thing. You make your way to the Senate House, this time with a little more confidence in your folds. The sun has barely risen, yet Rome is already rumbling. Bakers calling to each other, carts rattling over stones, early risers sweeping steps. You nod to a few fellow senators, each wrapped in various stages of wilting wool. One is dragging his hem along the ground like a sad cape. Another's pouch droops so low it's practically a purse. No one says anything. You all understand. This is the daily compromise. Inside the curia, the temperature is tolerable. Marble walls keep things cooler, and the absence of direct sun feels like a blessing from the gods. You sit, or rather perch, because togas hate sitting. That bulky front drape has to be managed just right, flattened under one thigh, spread over the knees, anchored with your forearm. One sneeze and the whole thing might avalanche. As speeches begin, you tune out the first few. It's always the same. Someone's upset about taxes, someone else is proposing a new aqueduct, and someone's accusing someone else of being too Greek. You focus instead on the men around you. Everyone's fidgeting. One scratches his shoulder under the fabric. Another dabs his brow with a handkerchief he's sneakily stashed in the folds. A third leans back, accidentally exposing a bit too much thigh. Scandalous. You wonder what would happen if one day everyone just showed up in tunics. Would the empire fall? Would Jupiter smite you? Or would it feel like finally exhaling after centuries of shallow breathing? Across the room, you spot old Senator Marius. A relic from the last generation, his toga is enormous. Not larger, just heavier. The wool looks thick enough to stop an arrow. He wears it proudly like a badge of honor or an anchor. He catches your eye and raises an eyebrow, silently judging your thinner, more modern drape. You look away. You don't need that heat. Because here's a rarely discussed truth. The quality of your toga mattered just as much as how you wore it. Wealthier men chose softer wool, imported dyes, even a looser weave if they could get away with it. But you had to be subtle. too obvious, and it looked like you were trying to cheat tradition. Too plain, and you looked like a pauper in white. Fashion in Rome was an endless tightrope, one wobble, and someone might write a poem mocking you. You shift in your seat, careful not to wrinkle anything critical. A young senator begins a passionate monologue about restoring the glory of old customs. He gestures wildly. His toga slides. He yanks it back with practiced panic. A chuckle ripples through the chamber. Not mean, just understanding. As the session winds down, the sun has fully risen. Light slants through the windows, catching dust motes and toga threads alike. You rise, aching slightly, and prepare to head home. Another day done, another layer of sweat infused into your woolly badge of honor. Outside, a breeze greets you, small, faint, but oh so welcome. It flutters the hem of your toga like a wink. You take it as a sign. Maybe today, when you get home, you'll hang the toga carefully, maybe spritz it with rose water, maybe you'll just toss it onto the floor like a dropped burden. Whatever you choose, one thing is certain. Tomorrow, it will be waiting, and so will your vestiplicus, comb at the ready, quietly muttering, "Not this again." The sun is at its peak now, and the streets of Rome are steaming. Even the shadows seem hot. As you step out of the curia, toga dragging and sticking in all the wrong places, you begin to question your life choices again. Should have been a baker, or a potter, or anything that didn't require you to drape yourself in wool in July. You dodge a pack of sweaty plebeians, shirtless, smiling, maybe drunk. They're not bound by the same fashion crucifixion. Tunics or no tunics, they roam freely, sleeves rolled up, dust on their ankles, carrying baskets of figs or shouting about gladiator matches. You try not to look jealous. You head toward the forum, weaving through the mosaic of clinking sandals and loud commerce. Vendors shout over one another, trying to sell olive oil, incense, knock-off Greek statues. The smell of fried fish and wet marble hits you like a slap. And still the toga clings. You feel like a baked potato in a fleece wrapper. You pause by a fountain. It gurgles soothingly, tempting you. But a senator dipping his toga in public? Scandalous. Maybe later, behind closed doors when no one is watching. You press on. Here's a thing people never talk about. Romans stank. Not just the plebs or the slaves or the soldiers who hadn't seen a bath since Britannia. No, even senators like you had your fragrant moments. Bathhouses helped, sure. But no matter how often you soaked in rose-scented water and scraped your armpits with a strigil, that toga soaked up everything, every emotion, every walk, every lunch under a lemon tree. You wore your week, and that's assuming it wasn't dyed, because white was the norm, but some senators got creative. The toga praetexta, for instance, had a bold purple stripe along the edge. Only magistrates and high-ranking officials could wear it. Purple, the most arrogant color of them all. Why? Because purple dye came from sea snails, tiny, angry mollusks whose mucus had to be harvested in huge quantities to produce even a little pigment. It was expensive, it was rare, it stank to high heaven, but it looked good on marble busts, so it stuck. Historians still argue whether these color rules were always respected, or if some ambitious senators just dyed a corner and hoped no one noticed. There are stories, probably exaggerated, of men bribing their paying their laundry slaves to sneak in illegal stripes, like cheating on your taxes but with wool. Speaking of laundry, you duck into a shaded alley seeking escape. Behind a row of insulae, you find the Fulanica, the laundry shop. A slave inside is stomping on a bundle of fabric inside a trough, bare feet sloshing through what you know is not just water. Yep, it's urine. Roman laundries used human pee to clean togas. The ammonia helped lift grease and sweat stains. People even got paid to collect their urine and bring it in. Public pee pots were a real thing. So next time you think your laundry service is overpriced, remember, at least no one's dancing barefoot in pee to wash your dress shirt. You nod respectfully to the fullers. They work hard. And your toga? It owes its ghostly shine to them. You keep walking, half hoping a breeze will kick up. Instead, you get a swarm of bees near a fig cart. Great. You swat with your free arm, nearly undoing your careful folds. The pouch shifts. You grab it instinctively. crisis averted. Across the plaza, a statue of Julius Caesar towers over the forum, stone toga draped dramatically, chest out, hand raised in eternal approval. It's always amused you, no Roman actually stood like that. You think about the poor sculptor who probably had to redo the folds 5 times because some senator kept yelling, "More dignity, less hip." And yet, these stone togas are how the world remembers you. Marble men in eternal robes locked in a permanent fashion statement. Immortalized discomfort. A shout grabs your attention. A boy is darting through the crowd with a scroll in his hand, probably a summons or some juicy piece of gossip. You envy him with his short tunic and bare legs. Efficient, fast, free. You glance down at your own bulky drapery. You know for a fact you can't run in this. Once during a fire drill at the Curia, a panicked senator tripped on his hem and face-planted into a column. The column cracked. He didn't. Of course, no one blamed the toga. That would be unpatriotic. No, they blamed the floor for being too smooth. Classic. Back on the main road, you pass a group of young men practicing speeches. Their gestures are wide, theatrical. Every now and then, a toga flap slaps someone in the face. You smile. Amateurs. But you admire their enthusiasm. They still believe in the dream that someday, if they practice hard enough, dress stiff enough, and sweat enough, they too can enter the hallowed halls of power. And maybe one day they will, and they'll hate the toga just as much as you do. A soft gust brushes your cheek. It lifts the edge of your garment just slightly. You close your eyes. For a brief, blissful second, the sweat doesn't matter, the heat doesn't sting, and you almost feel comfortable. Almost. But then the fabric shifts. A critical fold slides loose. You groan. Time to visit your vestiplicus again. Because no matter how many fountains you pass or breezes you chase, the toga always wins. You trudge back through the buzz of the forum, one hand subtly gripping the slipping fold of your toga, the other shielding your eyes from the merciless afternoon sun. You mutter under your breath about fashion tyranny and wool-based conspiracies, and somewhere, deep down, you wonder how on earth this became the symbol of power. That's the irony, isn't it? You suffer, sweat, stumble, and yet this toga elevates you. It separates you from the mob. It announces without words that you're a senator, a man of Rome, a public servant with access to the inner chambers of power and the inner circle of Rome's most exclusive lunch clubs. And when you arrive home, your domus on the Palatine Hill, with its cooled atrium and perfumed garden, you immediately do what every honest senator does behind closed doors. You strip. Not all the way, mind you. You're not a beast. But that toga is off before your sandals. You throw it, gracefully, you hope, onto a carved cedar bench, and it slumps there like a dead sheep. Relief floods you. Your arms can finally move freely. Your legs, revealed beneath your tunic, feel the sweet kiss of circulating air. You breathe deeply. See, there's a secret most statues don't reveal. Togas were not all-day attire. They were for show, for speeches, for state business and ceremonial posturing. But once home, you reverted to something far more breathable, like a linen tunic, or, in moments of desperation, absolutely nothing at all. Historians still argue whether senators wore their togas during private meals or simply lounged around in less formal wear once outside the public eye. Some say the strictest traditionalists kept them on during dinner parties. Others argue that even Cicero, verbose as he was, probably enjoyed eating grapes without his elbow stuck inside a wool pocket. You wander into your triclinium where lunch has been set out, olives, cheese, crusty bread, still warm, and a small bowl of garum, the fermented fish sauce that somehow made everything taste better and worse at the same time. You nibble, slowly, savouring the moment. There's a mosaic of Hercules on the floor, mid-feast, lion skin tossed over his shoulder like a dinner napkin. You smile. If Hercules could wear a lion, maybe you can survive your toga a little longer. You're halfway through your meal when your steward, an older, twitchy man with the patience of a dove, shuffles in and clears his throat. A delegation from Gaul, sir, waiting in the atrium. They wish to observe senatorial customs. You wipe your mouth with a cloth, not the good linen one. These Gauls don't know the difference. Of course they want to see you in the toga. You sigh. Back to the fleece. The outer layer is still slightly damp. You grit your teeth and hoist it onto your shoulders. The folds sag. You tug and pull and twist like a man wrangling a heavy curtain around his body. You call your slave. He runs in with the enthusiasm of someone who's refolded your toga 37 times this week already. He spins you, pins a hidden loop to your tunic, and lifts the drape with surgical precision. At last, you stand there once again, every fold where it's meant to be, looking like a cross between a judge and a roast wrapped in string. The Gauls are impressed. Wide eyes, murmurs. One of them tries to touch the fabric and is politely steered away by your steward, who whispers, "Sacred attire." The Gaul nods solemnly as if he's just seen Jupiter's bathrobe. You take a seat on your marble bench and launch into a well-rehearsed speech about Roman virtue, about discipline, about tradition. The Gauls nod vigorously. One of them sweats through his fur-lined cape. You feel a surge of pride. Misery loves company. You mention the toga candida, a version of the garment bleached until it glowed. Worn only by those running for office, it was a literal attempt to shine. It's where we get the word candidate. You joke that some of your peers bleached their togas so hard, they probably glowed in the dark. The Gauls don't laugh too soon. You end with a flourish, lifting your arm in a wide arc that nearly takes out a potted fig tree. The Gauls applaud politely, then file out, muttering about Roman customs and uncomfortable fabrics. As soon as they're gone, you sink into a nearby chaise, rip the toga off, and toss it with only mild ceremony into a woven basket. You don't care if it wrinkles, that's tomorrow's problem. You pour a little watered wine, yes, watered, because Romans found pure wine barbaric, and take a long sip. The cool clay cup is a comfort in your palm. The scent of thyme drifts from the garden, and that's when you remember tomorrow's the Vestalia, a religious festival, which means another public appearance, which means another long morning draped in wool while sacrificing cakes to Vesta's eternal flame. You let out a groan that echoes slightly off the mosaic walls. Still you think, maybe there's beauty in the ritual, a sort of stubborn poetry, in a world always trying to change. Politically, socially, even architecturally, the toga remains. Annoying, hot, iconic. You close your eyes and let your thoughts drift. Maybe to a cooler place. Maybe to the northern provinces where cloaks are practical and modesty doesn't weigh 15 pounds. Maybe to a time when senators could wear pants, but that's a fantasy too wild even for dreams. You wake just before dawn. The Roman sky hasn't decided yet if it wants to be black or gold. Somewhere out in the city, a rooster tries its best to be profound, and you decide it's time to rise, not because you're rested, but because today is Vestalia, and that means pageantry. You swing your legs off the side of the bed, the marble floor kissing your soles with that cold, judgmental Roman chill. The kind of chill that says, "Are you really ready to do this again?" And like always, you whisper back, "Do I have a choice?" Because the Vestalia isn't just any feast, it's the festival of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. And if there's one thing Rome respects, it's keeping the eternal flame alive, which means senators, especially you, are expected to show up, look solemn, and pretend they're spiritually moved while sweating like gladiators at intermission. You pull on your undertunic first. Thin, linen, merciful. Then comes the outer tunic, slightly thicker, dyed just off-white to indicate you're someone important, but not trying too hard. And finally, the beast, your toga. By now, your body has memorized the movement. You could almost don it in your sleep. Loop, fold, drape, twist. It clings to you like a needy lover, and you sigh in defeat. Today, you'll wear it for 6 hours minimum, maybe 7 if the Vestal Virgins give long speeches again. Stepping out into the street, you're hit with the scent of fresh bread, crushed olive leaves, and the faintest tang of fish brine wafting from a distant cart. You nod to a neighbour, a fellow senator already mid-toga adjustment, and togs, and together you trudge toward the temple of Vesta, like prisoners being marched to a very well-organized fete. The temple is humming with activity. White-robed priestesses move gracefully among woven garlands and pale stone altars. Flower petals litter the steps. Incense curls into the air like lazy thoughts. The public mills nearby, keeping their distance, whispering and pointing, not at the gods, but at you and your colleagues, wrapped like ceremonial burritos. And here's the strange part. Despite the discomfort, the wool, the chafing, you begin to feel something, a presence, a weight, not from the toga, but from the moment, the ancient continuity of it all. You take your place in the semicircle, beside men whose names you barely remember, but whose political allegiances you know by heart. You glance across at Gaius, who's tugging at his toga like it's trying to strangle him. Behind him, Marcus looks like he's praying. More likely, he's trying not to faint. As the flame is fed with offerings, small cakes made from sacred grain, you listen, you watch, you breathe. Historians still argue whether Vestalia had any direct link to senatorial duty, or if it was simply another opportunity for Rome's elite to show off their virtue in front of commoners. Some believe senators genuinely felt reverence here. Others suspect it was performative piety, executed with the same enthusiasm as tax season. You, personally? You're somewhere in the middle. Part of you is thinking about lunch, but another part can't help but feel a strange thrill. You're participating in something ancient, something older than consuls, older than roads, older even than togas. A priestess hands you a small vessel, cool, terracotta, filled with water, scented with herbs. You sprinkle it near the flame, murmuring the traditional words. You've forgotten the exact translation, but the meaning is clear. Protect the hearth, protect the city, protect the order, and that's really the toga's job, isn't it? Not just to clothe, but to contain, to structure the chaos, to wrap Rome's ideals into one long, itchy symbol. It's absurd, but it's also kind of magnificent. You step back into line, shoulders aching, folds slipping again. There's always one piece of fabric that refuses to obey. You adjust it discreetly, even though you know everyone else is doing the same. It's like synchronized suffering. After the ritual, you head to the basilica for a brief senatorial meeting. Brief, in Roman terms, meaning only 2 hours. Topics include grain supply, road repair, and one particularly heated debate over whether to fund another aqueduct or throw yet another triumph for yet another general. You speak, your voice echoing under the high vaults. You gesture, carefully, because any dramatic sweep of the arm might untangle your carefully coiled toga and expose more than your oratorical skills. A few senators doze, one openly munches a fig. You persist, and when it's done, you descend the steps, triumphant in your small victories, your small discomforts. The city, sprawling beneath you, is noisy and hungry and proud. You are part of it, even if only because you're wearing 5 yards of symbolic cloth. The sun climbs higher, pressing down on your shoulders. You duck into a shaded alley where your servant waits with a flask of water and the look of someone who's been holding back a sneeze since sunrise. You drink, you lean against a wall, you mutter about switching to a philosopher's robe. Your servant pretends not to hear. And just as you begin walking home, a child runs past you, trailing a strip of fabric, clearly torn from some discarded toga. He's playing a game, maybe pretending to be a senator himself. He twirls. He trips. He laughs. You chuckle, despite yourself. You remember being that child once, before the weight of wool and responsibility wrapped around your shoulders like fate. Now, as you walk back through the bustle of the forum, you realize something oddly comforting. This discomfort you wear, it connects you not just to the Republic or the gods or the rituals, but to the very idea of Rome itself. And yes, it's scratchy. Yes, it's ridiculous. But it's yours. You make it back home just as the afternoon shadows begin to stretch like lazy cats across the cobbled courtyard. A pigeon lands near the fountain, looks at you with the blank disdain only pigeons can manage, and resumes pecking at nothing. You are home. But your toga, like an overly polite guest, refuses to leave. You peel it off carefully, unwrapping layer after layer, like some overcooked ceremonial onion. Each fold is damp, heavy, slightly scented with temple smoke and human ambition. Once it's off, your body exhales in relief. You stretch, you scratch. You flop onto a bench like a sack of democracy. A servant gathers the toga and whisks it away to be brushed, aired, and laid flat like the diplomatic skin of a very large, very fussy sheep. The wool doesn't just get washed, it gets honoured, and after all that, it will still smell vaguely like old marble and even older sweat. You lounge, sipping watered wine, half listening to the street outside. A merchant argues over olive prices, someone drops a pot, somewhere a dog is very convinced the world needs to know it exists. You doze off for a moment, dreaming, not of wars or orations, but of silk. Lightweight, fluttering, un-Roman silk. The kind you once saw on an embassy from Parthia. They glided into the Senate like ghosts of comfort, and everyone hissed under their breath because they were both impressed and offended. Rome, you think, likes things that itch. It likes reminders. The toga is a reminder of what you owe, of who you are, of what must be endured. Later, you wake to the sound of your steward approaching. "There's a visitor," he says, with the tone of someone who knows you were pretending to be asleep. You sigh and sit up. It's Lucilla. You haven't seen her in years, but you know the outline even before she enters. Straight back, sharp jaw, eyes that missed nothing, even when she was 12. She was your cousin's daughter, or was it your uncle's niece? Roman family trees are more like vines. She enters, and she's still wrapped in her stola, the female version of your toga, though infinitely more manageable. She's a philosopher now, of the Stoic school, which means she believes pain is a useful illusion, and probably that your complaints about wool are spiritually shallow. She smiles, but in that Roman way where you're never entirely sure if it's because she's pleased to see you, or just impressed by how badly you're aging. You return the smile, wave her to a seat, and offer figs. She takes 2. Never trust a Stoic who says no to figs. She's here, it turns out, to ask about senatorial protocol for an upcoming funeral. A high-born widow, very traditional. She wants the proper rites, public lament, family procession, togas and all. Lucilla's organizing it because apparently even in death, some Romans care deeply about how well your neighbors judge your drapery. As she speaks, you nod, your brain half drifting, because funerals and togas go hand in hand. There's the toga pulla, the dark, mourning version, made of unbleached wool, coarse and as comforting as a tax audit. Senators wear them during public grief, like when a general dies or the gods are particularly annoyed. Historians still debate whether the toga pulla genuinely symbolized mourning, or if it was just Rome's version of dressing the mood. Some argue it was about optics, projecting solemnity without having to say a word. Others think it was spiritual, a way of dimming one's presence to avoid attracting more divine misfortune. Lucilla stands and bows slightly. "You'll attend?" she asks. You nod, of course. How could you not? The funeral is for a friend of your father's. You'll wear the pulla, you'll stand silently, you'll sweat, because apparently grief also causes perspiration. And once again, the toga will become more than just fabric. It will become ritual. After she leaves, you sit with the quiet for a while. And then you remember your father's funeral. You were younger then, barely shaving. You remember struggling with the folds of the mourning toga, panicking as the procession moved forward, and your right shoulder was still exposed when it wasn't supposed to be. Your uncle reached over, fixed it in one swift movement, and gave you a look that said, "Pull yourself together, or I'll do it for you." You remember how heavy it felt. Not the wool, the moment, the eyes watching, the expectation. Rome doesn't grieve quietly. It demands a performance. The toga is your costume, your cue, your curtain call. You rise and step into the atrium. A shaft of afternoon light pierces the open roof, catching dust motes in golden suspension. You stand there for a long time, eyes half closed, letting the warmth erase the lines of fabric that had pressed into your skin all morning. And suddenly, there's a question floating to the top of your mind, one that's been simmering quietly under every toga-folded ritual you've performed. Is this all real, or just very, very expensive theatre you wouldn't be the first to ask? Even in Cicero's time, senators mocked each other behind closed doors, laughing about who wore their toga like a peasant and who needed 3 slaves just to arrange a single pleat. Historians still argue whether the Roman elite ever truly believed in the symbolism, or if they simply learned to fake it very, very well. You lean against a column, the stone warm from the sun. There's something oddly comforting in the repetition of it all. The rituals, the robes, the roles. Even if it's theatre, it's old theatre. The kind that carries memory in its bones. Tomorrow there's another meeting, another procession. Another chance to wrap yourself in empire and pretend that the folds will protect you. But for now, the air is still, and the pigeons have finally shut up. The up. The next morning arrives with a breeze, warm, citrus-tinged and fleeting, as if the gods were toying with the idea of kindness before deciding against it. You rise before the city fully stirs, the sky still painted in a sleepy wash of lavender and gold. It's funeral day. You sit upright on the edge of your low, wooden bed. Your back cracks in 3 places. A reminder that you're not 20 anymore, or 30, or particularly interested in counting. A slave brings in your mourning toga, the puller. It's heavier than your usual one, darker, scratchier, and somehow more accusatory, like it knows you didn't actually like the deceased that much. You sigh. Time to become a symbol again. Getting into the toga puller is an ordeal that borders on spiritual warfare. Even with help, it feels like wrestling a damp, angry bear made of woven obligation. Your right arm slips out as it should. The wool clings in all the wrong places. The hem refuses to hang evenly. And of course, a part of it dips directly into your breakfast bowl. You don't yell, you just stare into your wine-soaked porridge and wonder, briefly, if Jupiter takes requests for small, targeted lightning strikes. As you're being fussed over, your steward recites the day's agenda like a magistrate announcing criminal charges. The funeral, the Senate, a late afternoon discussion on grain prices again, and a private supper with the nephew of someone important whose name you will forget before dessert. You trudge out the door, the dark wool absorbing the sunlight like a moral sponge. Everything about you now screams, I am very sad, but also still powerful. A toga puller isn't meant to flatter, it's meant to broadcast suffering. Think of it as public relations in wool form. As you move through the forum, other men in mourning garb join the tide. Some wear theirs perfectly, others not so much. One man's toga keeps slipping off his shoulder like it's trying to escape. Another has accidentally revealed a suspiciously vibrant tunic underneath, possibly purple. Scandalous! Historians still argue whether this colour breach was a rebellious flourish or just a fashion accident with consequences. The procession begins with a slow, rhythmic dirge. Musicians, if you can call them that, play double pipes with the enthusiasm of exhausted goats. Women wail dramatically. Mourners toss flowers with exaggerated sobs. You suspect one of them is being paid by the decibel. The body lies in a carved wooden litter, pale and posed with a coin over each eye, ready for Karen's ferry ride. The face is waxy, dignified, and disturbingly serene. You think about how this person once argued passionately about tax law, and now he is a centerpiece in a slow-moving theatre of grief. The toga puller around him is pristine. In death, at least, you get the folds right. As you march, you reflect, because that's what the toga is for. It invites stillness, slowness, thought. You wonder if the man beneath the shroud ever questioned the whole charade. Whether, like you, he ever stood on a quiet balcony after a Senate session, stripped off his toga, and asked the stars if any of it mattered. You pass a statue of Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome. He's depicted in a classic pose, muscular, noble, draped in a toga that barely covers his modesty, which says a lot about Roman priorities. Romulus probably didn't even wear a toga. Back then, loincloths were the rage. Historians still argue whether early depictions like these were deliberate anachronisms to tie modern power to mythic roots, or just artistic laziness. The procession winds its way up the Via Sacra. You overhear snippets of whispered gossip among the onlookers, some about the dead man's scandalous dinner parties, others about who cried most convincingly. A woman in the crowd points to your fold, slightly uneven. You adjust it without breaking stride. It's a dance, this whole thing. A choreography of controlled sorrow. Eventually, you reach the pyre. It's tall, garlanded, almost beautiful. The sun hits the gold trim on the bier just right, making it shine like the promises of youth, brief, bright, and ultimately flammable. You stand silently as the flame is lit. There is no speech, just smoke, acrid, thick. It rises into the sky like the soul of a bureaucrat looking for its next meeting. Your eyes water, not just from the fumes, you tell yourself. And then it's done. No applause. Just the quiet crackling of a life reduced to memory and ash. The toga clings tighter as the wind shifts. You think about your own end, whether your puller will be worn by men you barely know, whether someone will comment on your folds, whether anyone will care if you were a good senator or just a tolerable one with decent snacks. Back down the hill, the city resumes. Market stalls clatter open. Children dart between columns. A stray dog decides your sandal looks edible. You swat it away gently. Life continues, indifferent to your garments. At the Senate meeting, most of the men are still in mourning togas. You all look like somber sheep in various stages of wilting. The debate is about a tax increase on imported pepper. It's heated. One man's voice cracks with rage. Another pounds the bench dramatically, only to be scolded by the presiding magistrate for wrinkling his toga. Yes, really. You lean back, feeling the sweat form under the wool again. You imagine peeling it off in your atrium later, watching it flop to the floor like a defeated curtain. You wonder if you'll ever wear white again, because here's the thing, you start to forget what comfort feels like. After days in mourning garb, the sensation of crisp linen or bare shoulders feels almost scandalous. Historians still debate whether the extended wearing of the puller was psychological penance or just peer pressure passed down through centuries. You think of Lucilla again, how she called the puller necessary suffering. Maybe she's right. Maybe all these rituals, these itchy symbols, keep Rome intact. Maybe if everyone showed up in silk, the Republic would collapse under the weight of its own comfort. As the session ends, you rise stiffly, the toga shifts, and for a brief second, the sunlight hits the fold just right. You almost admire it. Almost. But really, you're just tired and itchy and ready to go home. You walk home slowly, dragging your feet across the worn stones like a man who's either deeply contemplative or deeply constipated. A few passing citizens nod with just enough solemnity to acknowledge your mourning toga without pretending to care who you were mourning. That's Rome. Everyone respects the performance more than the plot. Back in your atrium, a slave offers to remove your toga puller. You wave him off. Not yet. You've worn it this long, you might as well marinate in the full emotional effect. Instead, you wander into the peristyle garden. The air smells of rosemary and wet terracotta. A fountain gurgles softly, one of those delicate Roman ones that serves more as mood lighting than hydration. You sit on a stone bench and exhale the kind of sigh that belongs in sculpture. It's here, surrounded by trimmed hedges and the ghost of funeral incense, that your mind drifts back to your first day in the Senate. You were young, confident, a little too confident actually. You wore your toga like it was a superhero cape. Wrong fold, wrong length, and definitely too much perfume. You looked like a fragrant ghost. They laughed, of course. Quietly, but you heard it. No one told you how to wear it properly. That was part of the test. You were supposed to learn through shame, like a toddler with a spoon. And you did, eventually. Now look at you, seamlessly wrapped, brows furrowed at all the right moments. You've become one of those old senators who can stand perfectly still and make younger men sweat. The toga helps. It drapes you in time, status, and quiet menace. But the cost, you shift uncomfortably. That cost is currently sticking to your ribcage, because no matter how well you learn the toga's choreography, it never loves you back. It tolerates you. And that's only because you never dared question its place. Well, not publicly. You recall an old colleague, Fabius Cotta, clever man, terrible folder. One day he arrived in a stitched tunic that looked suspiciously Greek, said he was embracing efficiency. Within an hour, the Senate had him called out for inappropriate dress undermining Roman dignity. Within a week, he was mysteriously reassigned to a governorship in some mosquito-infested province near the edge of the empire. His only toga now is probably being chewed on by termites. So you wear yours, you fold, you comply, you scratch. Across the garden, a young servant carries a basket of figs humming softly. You remember how many rules even slaves had about clothing. No colourful dyes, no silk, nothing too nice lest someone think they were getting ideas. Romans feared nothing more than the wrong person wearing the wrong thing. It wasn't just cloth, it was containment. There was even an unspoken law about mourning. Too much sorrow, weakness, too little, disrespect. The toga puller balanced both. Heavy enough to convey loss, but structured enough to maintain authority. Historians still argue whether the strict codes around mourning attire were genuinely about grief or simply another method of preserving class optics. You lean back, the stone cold against your spine. A breeze lifts your toga slightly, and for a moment you consider letting it fall. Just let it slide to the floor. Sit there, bare-shouldered, maybe eat a fig, and breathe like a normal human, but you don't. Because tomorrow there's another meeting, another vote, another reason to wrap yourself in wool and act like you believe it all matters. Later that evening, you gather with a few old friends. Senators, mostly. The kind who still have enough hair to complain about it. You drink warm wine, the kind that's been sitting in an amphora since before your last midlife crisis. Someone brings up the new recruits in the Senate, young, wide-eyed, tragically clean. They wear their togas like bed sheets. One man laughs. They smell like olive oil and fear, another adds. You chuckle, but it's half-hearted. You remember that fear. You wore it once. Probably still do, but now it hides under sarcasm and expensive sandals. The conversation turns to reform. Again. Every few years, someone suggests a toga redesign. Lighter fabrics, less drape, maybe even sleeves. And every time, the suggestion dies faster than a scroll in a fire. Because deep down, Rome doesn't want change. Rome wants permanence. And nothing screams permanence like a garment that hasn't evolved since the Punic Wars. One senator leans in conspiratorially. You know, there was a merchant from the east, said he had fabric that breathes like linen, but softer.
Said even camels wore it. Camels don't have senates, someone mutters. Everyone laughs, but the idea lingers. What if, you wonder, just briefly, what if you could wear something cool, comfortable, maybe even stylish? No, madness. You excuse yourself early, citing grief. No one questions it. You shuffle home, alone. The streets are quiet now, moonlight pooling like spilled milk on the paving stones. Your sandals echo faintly, a lonely rhythm that matches your breath. In your chamber, you finally let the toga puller fall. It slumps to the floor with a tired sigh, as if it too is weary of the day's drama. You step away from it gingerly, like it might come alive and wrap itself back around you out of sheer habit. You stretch, muscles groan, the cool air kisses your skin. And for one blissful moment, you're just a man again. Not a senator, not a symbol.
Just a human with sore shoulders and a growing suspicion that wool was Rome's greatest prank. You collapse onto your bed, the linen sheets welcoming you like old friends. No folds, no pleats, just fabric that lies still. The moonlight spills across the floor, catching the hem of your discarded toga puller. You don't look at it. You just breathe. You wake up before dawn, because of course you do. You're a Roman senator. Sleep is for slaves and poets. The morning air is brisk, pressing against your bare skin with that crisp judgment only Roman villas can deliver. Outside, a servant scurries across the courtyard with a tray of watered wine and stale bread. Breakfast of champions. As you sit up and let your feet touch the cold marble floor, your eyes drift again to the heap of cloth by the bedside. The toga puller, the symbol of loss, still rumpled like a sulking child in the corner. You sigh. You should burn it. That's what's done after the mourning period. And yet you hesitate. There's something about its weight, its defiant blackness, that feels honest. The regular toga, your old faithful off-white wrap, that one is all show. But this one doesn't lie. It says, you are exhausted, you are not healed. You are being watched and also sweating. You eventually fold it badly and tuck it away. Tomorrow you'll return to the usual toga, the one that says everything is fine and Rome is eternal. Even when it's not, down in the atrium you find your brother waiting. He nods, says nothing. You're both still wearing the mourning expressions of men who own too many villas and not enough peace. He's in his regular toga already, of course he is. You share some watered wine and discuss mundane Senate business. Grain prices, some rebellious governor on the Rhine frontier, the usual collapse-adjacent gossip. Then, out of nowhere, he asks, "Do you ever wonder why we still wear this thing?" You nearly choke on your wine, because there it is. The question. The forbidden one. You play dumb. "The toga." He nods. It's hot. It's itchy. Everyone hates it. We all know how to wrap it, and yet every day I get a new blister in the same exact spot. You smirk. Tradition. He laughs. That's not a reason. That's a shrug, with a marble plaque. You look out into the courtyard. A breeze rustles the fig trees. Somewhere a dog barks at absolutely nothing, as is Roman canine tradition. Your brother leans in, whispering like he's committing treason. There's this merchant from Sicilia. He says there's a new way to pleat it, diagonally, supposed to keep you cooler. You arch an eyebrow. Sounds dangerously comfortable. He chuckles. Exactly. Dangerous. You both fall into silence, sipping your wine. The kind of silence that says, yes, we know this whole empire is one giant performance, but we're too tired to cancel the show. Historians still argue whether senators ever truly believed in the symbols they clung to, or whether they simply played their parts because the alternative was social death, or worse, fashion scandal. Later that day, you return to the Curia. The Senate is in full session. You stand among rows of stiff-backed men, each wrapped in togas that rustle like dry leaves. The air smells like sweat and ambition. The ceiling creaks with the weight of history, literal, not metaphorical. There's probably a bust of Jupiter up there just waiting to fall on someone mid-speech. Today's agenda includes debate on aqueduct funding, but the real drama is unfolding silently on fabric. A young senator from Hispania has shown up wearing what can only be described as a summer toga. Thinner wool, shorter hem, and, God's help us all, bare arms, gasps, whispers. One man drops his stylus. The boy speaks confidently, eloquently. But it doesn't matter, his outfit is louder than his words. By the time he sits down, the chamber is buzzing like a disturbed beehive in a library. You lean toward your neighbor and mutter, "I give it an hour." He nods grimly. He'll be voluntarily retiring by sunset. Sure enough, the reprimand arrives within the hour. Not official, of course. No one ever says it out loud. It's a quiet suggestion, a cold shoulder, a summons to the censor's office. Tomorrow the boy will be back in regulation toga, eyes dulled like old marble. You wonder if anyone even remembers why the toga must be worn the way it is. The original intent? Was it to emulate the gods, or to show off how much fabric you could afford? Maybe both. One theory you heard once, over cheap wine with a very drunk historian, was that the toga's size was designed to restrict movement, to force senators into slow, deliberate gestures. Cultivate gravitas, the man slurred, gesturing wildly and nearly toppling a bowl of olives. Another theory claimed that the toga's folds symbolized Roman values, dignity, modesty, and a near-total lack of airflow. It's all just myth layered on myth. A toga of ideas draped over the body of a city that hasn't bathed in self-awareness for centuries. You get through the rest of the day with the usual motions: nod, murmur, stroke, chin, disapprove, adjust folds. Repeat. Someone proposes a new road. Someone else demands a new law about bread sizes. The toga wraps around you like a security blanket stitched from bureaucracy. By evening, you're walking home again, sandals slapping against the warm stone like the heartbeat of a city that never learned to relax. As you pass through the forum, you spot a statue of a senator. You know the one, Marcus Portius. Stoic, square-jawed, arms crossed over a perfectly sculpted toga. You used to admire him. Now all you see is how impossible his folds are. No real toga ever sat like that. It's marble propaganda, toga core fantasy. You pause, look up at his unwrinkled face, and say softly, "Bet you didn't wear it in summer either." Then, because no one's watching, you do something reckless. You loosen your toga, just slightly, just enough to let a breath of air find your skin. A private rebellion, a hidden comfort. The statue doesn't blink, and for one brief, blessed moment, neither do you. Night in Rome doesn't bring cool relief, just a different kind of heaviness. The sun may have dropped below the terracotta rooftops, but the heat lingers, clinging to the marble walls like gossip. You lie awake, toga folded on the bench nearby, sheet tangled around your legs, thinking about fabric, not just fabric, identity, legacy, expectations stitched with invisible thread. You remember when you were first allowed to wear the toga virilis, the man's toga, a rite of passage. White, bright, and terribly scratchy. They wrapped you in it like you'd been chosen for something noble. The entire family celebrated. Your mother cried, your father nodded solemnly, your uncle gifted you a brooch that you promptly lost within a week. Back then you didn't understand what the toga represented. You only knew it made you stand out. People spoke to you differently. Slaves bowed deeper. Street vendors addressed you with dominus instead of pur. It felt like magic. It also felt like being watched. As the days passed, you realized something. The toga wasn't really for you. It was for everyone else. A public performance, a cloth-based announcement that you were now responsible, serious, and uncomfortably warm. And that never changed. The older you got, the more layers were added, not just to the cloth, but to the meaning. Toga with a red stripe? You're a senator now. Toga picta with embroidery? You're in a triumph parade. Toga puller, someone died. Again. The fabric shifts, the rules pile on, but the burden stays the same. You are always on display. Historians still argue whether the toga's symbolism evolved organically from practical use, or if it was consciously crafted by elites to reinforce hierarchy. Was it ever truly about comfort or utility? Or was it always meant to say, "Look at me, I suffer publicly for Rome"? You turn onto your side. The moonlight cuts through the window, painting stripes on the floor like spectral pleats. Somewhere beyond the hills, someone else is wrapping themselves in the same uniform, maybe proudly, maybe huddly, maybe reluctantly, maybe not at all. Not all Romans wore togas, of course. Most didn't. The average citizen preferred the tunic, simple, breezy, and blessedly short. Even some officials quietly opted for modified togas, a little shorter, a little looser, especially outside the city centre. In the provinces, toga compliance was spotty at best. One satirical playwright once joked that in Gaul the toga was seen more as a punishment than a privilege. Still, in Rome proper, the social pressure was relentless. Appear in the forum without your toga, scandal. Appear in court without your toga, illegal. Appear at a funeral in the wrong colour toga, may the gods help you. And yet the actual guidelines were never written down in one clear rulebook. That's the Roman way. Vague expectations, heavy consequences. It's how they built an empire out of shrugs and swords. You close your eyes, but your thoughts keep unraveling like an improperly folded hem. What if just once you showed up at the Senate in a tunic? What if you dared the whispers, the side glances, the scribbled notes on wax tablets? What if you wore sandals that didn't squeak? What if, God's forbid, you did none of it? Maybe you'd disappear. Not literally, but socially. Invitations would dry up. Your name would be skipped in roll call. The clients who crowd your door every morning would find other senators to flatter. One day, you'd wake up, and no one would need your opinion on aqueduct maintenance anymore. You would still exist. You just wouldn't matter. That's the fear, isn't it? That without the rituals, without the cloth and the pageantry and the posture, you're just a man, just one of many, sweating, aging, replaceable. You let out a slow breath. Remember Lucius Marinus? Of course you do. Everyone does. The senator who tried to introduce a summer toga, some linen abomination he swore would revolutionize civic fashion, light as air, breathable, easier to wrap. He gave a whole speech about it on the Senate floor, practically modeling it while he spoke. He made it 1 week. By day 5, the jokes had taken root. Lucius, the linen lord, Senator see-through, the whispering rap. By day 7, he was mysteriously reassigned to a minor agricultural tribunal in a province so remote even the maps gave up halfway through. You think about him sometimes. Wonder if he's cooler now. Still, every once in a while someone gets away with bending the rules. A particularly charismatic or powerful senator will slightly shift his draping style, or opt for a thinner underlayer, or even tuck his toga a bit higher on the shoulder. Little rebellions. Tiny breaths of freedom, and sometimes those changes stick. Historians still debate whether the gradual evolution of the toga from the early rounded style to the later, more angular drapes was a natural aesthetic shift or a quiet form of political resistance. You like to imagine it was both. That somewhere, centuries ago, a man stood in his bedroom at dawn and said, "Nope, not doing this exact fold today," and somehow started a trend. And so the toga remains a fabric fossil of the Republic, a ghost of the old ways, wrapping new bodies in old ideas. You drift into sleep for a few minutes, maybe longer. A dream flickers in and out, a Senate meeting held entirely in bathrobes. Someone's debating road tariffs while holding a sponge on a stick. It's oddly comforting, then a knock at your door. Your servant enters with tomorrow's toga, freshly brushed and folded with terrifying precision. You nod, barely awake, already dreading the effort it will take to wear it properly. You wonder briefly if anyone would notice if you recycled yesterday's fold pattern. Probably not, but then again, maybe everything would collapse. You sit up, run a hand through your hair, and mutter, "Time to dress like civilization itself depends on it." Because in Rome, it sort of does. You stand, stretch, and face the toga like a reluctant gladiator eyeing the arena. It's draped neatly over a cedar wood frame, mocking you with its pristine folds. The weight of it isn't just physical, it's ceremonial. A few feet of wool that somehow feels heavier than a legion's shield. You sigh and begin the process. Left shoulder, sweep around, tuck at the waist, pinch the drape just so. Twist the fabric over the arm, but not too tightly, unless you want to look like you've been caught in a curtain fight. You check yourself in the polished bronze mirror, frown, adjust again. Your reflection frowns back, equally unimpressed. As always, your right arm is left immobilized, trapped beneath the folds. You're basically wearing a fancy straitjacket. If someone handed you a scroll right now, you'd need a minute and a prayer just to grab it. You don't complain aloud, of course. That's what slaves are for, tucking, folding, even holding your wine while you figure out how to sit without exposing your knees. But the irony remains. The garment designed to represent freedom and dignity is one of the least practical things you own. There's a theory, historians still argue over it, that the toga's design intentionally restricted movement, a way of discouraging impulsive gestures in the Senate, or, some say, a silent symbol of self-control. Others argue that it's just what happens when aesthetics evolve faster than practicality. Either way, here you are, dignified, yes, but also vaguely wrapped like a man-sized cannoli. You step into the morning light. Rome is already buzzing. Street vendors shout in overlapping melodies, their cries bouncing between stone walls. You catch a whiff of honey cakes from the corner bakery. Somewhere a donkey brays in existential protest. Your toga naturally absorbs the heat like a wool sponge. Sweat beads along your temples. Your sandals flap rhythmically as you walk down the cobbled street, a slow, stifled procession. At the forum, you're not alone. Dozens of other senators shuffle in like heat-stroked ghosts, each draped in identical togas. White wool, a parade of conformity. The only way to distinguish anyone is by how well or how poorly their toga is arranged. There's Gaius, whose toga always looks like it lost a fight with gravity. And there's Quintus, with folds so crisp they could slice bread. You greet them with nods, brief murmurs. No one mentions the sweat. No one mentions the heat. You all simply exist in it, together. As you walk, you notice the statues. Stone men in stone togas, frozen mid-oration. One of them used to be your hero. Still is, in a way. You remember staring up at him as a child, trying to mimic his posture, his gaze, the stern line of his jaw. Now you mostly admire how effortlessly his folds fall into place. Must be nice not to have to move. There's a part of you, small, cheeky and increasingly vocal, that wonders if Roman men spent more time fussing over their togas than women did their stolas. You've definitely seen more toga drama in one Senate session than in a full season of Vestal gossip. Of course, women had their own fashion codes, the stola, the palla, the hairstyles that could rival architectural blueprints. But at least their garments allowed for movement, breathing, expression. The toga, by contrast, was designed to erase difference. Everyone equal, everyone subdued. Senators, citizens, conquerors. Well, everyone male and Roman-born anyway. Even the colours had meaning. Pure white for regular use, off-white with a purple stripe for senatorial status, black for mourning, purple for triumph, though that was reserved for the emperor or someone very temporarily adored by the people. You'd think all this cloth would make the system flexible, but no. The more rules you add, the stiffer the society becomes. Historians still debate whether the toga's decline was due more to changes in climate, economics, or shifting cultural identity as the empire expanded. Some believe the wool shortage played a role. Others argue it simply went out of style, like any other fashion eventually does. But in this moment, you're not concerned with the decline of empire. You're concerned with sitting down gracefully. It's a maneuver that requires genuine planning. You can't just plop. You have to glide, lower yourself carefully, arrange the folds to avoid scandalous knee exposure, and then settle into a position that suggests both authority and comfort, while actually experiencing neither. You succeed. Barely. A younger senator plops beside you, grunting as he readjusts his toga. They should invent a summer version, he mutters. You smirk, but say nothing. Poor Lucius Marinus, exiled patron saint of breathable textiles, floats back into your mind. The debate begins, a motion about funding for road repairs. You half listen, nod at the right moments, and dab your forehead with a handkerchief. The toga's collar itches. You subtly shift your shoulder. The fold slips. You sigh. At some point, a pigeon lands on the marble railing nearby, cocking its head with what you swear is judgment. You envy its feathered freedom. No toga, no senate, no 32-step folding ritual. The day stretches on. You manage to speak once, briefly, eloquently, even earning a nod from the senior consul. But all you can think about is getting home and unwrapping yourself like a sad birthday present. When the session ends, there's a quiet exodus. Senators trickle out, their togas dragging just slightly more than before, as if the fabric has absorbed all their energy. You catch sight of yourself in a window pane. You look tired, yes, but Roman. Presentable, ancient, burdened. Back at home, the servants help peel the toga away. You sigh with something bordering on pleasure. You feel like a human again, a sweaty, slightly chafed human, but one with functional arms. You sit near the atrium, sipping watered wine, watching the shadows stretch across the walls. For all its absurdity, you admit the toga does one thing very well. It marks you.
Not just
Not just as a senator, but as part of something older, larger, and more complicated than one person. It's itchy, it's inconvenient, it's almost theatrical, but it's also tradition. And tradition, in Rome, is as sacred as the gods, especially the ones nobody actually believes in anymore. You smile to yourself. Maybe tomorrow you'll experiment with a slightly different tuck. Nothing radical, just a whisper of rebellion, one fold at a time. The evening air cools slowly now, and you find yourself outside beneath a sky streaked with deep purples and soft golds. The city's noise fades into a gentle murmur. The clatter of footsteps on stone, the distant laughter of children playing by the fountains, the occasional bark of a dog somewhere in the narrow alleys. You lean against a column, feeling the smooth marble beneath your fingers, your toga wrapped around you like a well-worn story. You think back on the countless hours spent wrestling with this garment, how it shaped your movements, your posture, your very presence. The toga wasn't just fabric, it was a statement, a barrier, and a burden all woven together. And yet it was also comfort, a connection to generations of men who had worn it before you, who had sworn oaths, debated laws, and carried the weight of the Republic on these very folds. Historians still argue about the origin of the toga, whether it was truly a uniquely Roman invention or adapted from earlier cultures. Some suggest it began as a simple cloak, evolving over centuries into the complex, symbolic garment you know today. Others see it as a deliberate invention of the elite, designed to mark distinction and reinforce social order. But tonight, you're not concerned with origins or theories. You're simply here, wrapped in history, feeling its gentle pressure as the city prepares to sleep. The twilight deepens, shadows lengthen, and the cool breeze carries the faint scent of olive trees and distant cooking fires. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the voices of senators long gone, their whispered debates echoing through time, carried on the folds of the toga. You recall the quirks too, the odd superstitions, like the belief that folding your toga a certain way could bring good luck or ward off ill fortune, or the fringe notion some hold that the folds resemble a map of Rome itself, a secret code woven into the fabric. Whether true or not, these stories add texture to the garment's legacy, making it more than mere clothing. As you stand, you slowly unravel the toga, feeling the cool night air on your skin again. There's a softness in this ritual now, a moment of release. The long day of appearances and expectations melts away with the fabric pooling gently at your feet. You step forward into the quiet streets, lighter without the heavy wool, your sandals tapping softly on the stone. The city's heart beats steadily, timeless and patient. Somewhere above, stars begin to prick the sky. Tiny points of light that have witnessed every fold, every debate, every restless night spent in woolen confinement. You breathe in deeply, savoring the peace. The toga will be waiting for you again come dawn, inevitable, stubborn, unyielding. But for now there is freedom in the night. You walk slowly, feeling the cool breeze on your skin and the whisper of history in the air. Tomorrow will bring the weight of tradition once more, but tonight you carry only the quiet comfort of the past and the gentle promise of rest. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city has quieted, and you feel the softness of night settling over everything, like a gentle woolen cloak that's lighter, kinder than the toga you wore all day. The heat of Rome fades into a distant memory, replaced by a cool calm that invites your body to relax, your mind to drift. You imagine the folds of fabric unraveling slowly, like your thoughts smoothing out into a peaceful rhythm. The weight of expectation lifts, replaced by the comforting notion that this moment is yours alone, a pause between history and sleep, between the stories worn and the dreams yet to come. Outside, The world moves softly, footsteps distant and hushed, like a lullaby sung just for you. The scents of the city, olive groves, warm stone, distant hearth fires, blend into a soothing symphony for your senses. You feel the steady pulse of time, ancient and endless, wrapping around you as securely as any toga ever did. Tonight, you rest wrapped not in obligation, but in quiet wonder. The grandeur and fuss of the toga, the Senate, the city itself, all fade gently to the background, leaving only the steady beat of your breathing and the soft hum of the night. Let your eyes close easily now and let the fabric of history fold around you, a warm embrace from a time long past but never truly gone. The stories you carry will wait patiently for your return. Sleep well, friend. The toga will be here when you wake, but for now there is only peace.